Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to AI in Veterinary Medicine podcast. Today we have Dr. Ollie Weiner here. Dr. Ollie, how are you?
Great, thank you. How are you, Kevin?
All good, all good. Thank you for being here. The first time that I spoke with you, I was immediately drawn to your experience because it said, you're a surgeon, but you're also a CTO. And, that was like, wait, what? So I would love for you if you can tell our audience, your journey through veterinary medicine and through software and technology and that combination.
Sure. I graduated from the Royal Veterinary College in the UK about 17 years ago, and I spent 10 years in small animal practice. My father's a vet as well, and I was involved in kind of running bits of the clinic, but particularly around the kind of the IT side because I'd always had a big interest in IT and tech. From a very young age, I'd kind of taken one of his modems he used to communicate between his clinic sites, and I hooked it up to like a bulletin board service, and I was
Wow.
always experimenting and kind of self taught. And I was building websites through, kind of the late 90s as a teenager in the kind of wild west of the kind of internet era. Paid my way through university building, websites here and there. And then just kind of was always tinkering on the side. And there was a big period of consolidation in UK veterinary practices. And we sold our clinic in 2017. But at that same time, I'd been building an online appointment booking system and client portal, originally for myself. But I started to see some value in commercializing that, and one of the bigger corporates in the UK showed an interest, so I moved into doing that full time with
Nice.
them. I spent some time working with some of the practice management companies, talking to various kind of corporates with a real kind of emphasis, I guess, on how clinicians use the tech, workflow optimization, all of those kind of buzzwords about how we enable clinicians to be more efficient at what they do, and to worry less about the kind of tech that surrounds it and the kind of overhead of having to use that technology. And then I merged with another company in the sort of start of COVID, called VetHelp Direct. We built another system called Digital Practice, which is a client communications tool. And that, I guess, I was sort of reaching a point where I started missing clinical practice, and I
Yeah.
guess I'm sort of like coming almost sort of
I
full
was gonna
circle.
say, were you doing clinical practice at any of these times? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I wasn't, and I guess the rose tinted glasses got progressively more rose tinted over time. I missed that. I missed the clinics,
Yeah.
and I met up with a couple of guys sort of randomly on LinkedIn. They reached out to me. They had a background in human healthcare, investment and venture capital. And we got talking about the vet market and kind of looked at what how the market was changing, how the impact of the consolidation and what was happening in other markets like the US, and decided that we were gonna build some clinics. And I guess it's almost a sort of Apple type approach, the kind of Apple Android way where, Apple want to deliver the best experience, or they always used to, by saying that, we build the hardware and we build the software. And I
Yes.
think that's what we think we're doing, that we can get the best kind of marrying of the technology and the clinical processes if we control both of them end to end. So the current enterprise is called HelloVet,
Okay.
and we're opening our first clinic in a couple of months in London.
Well, congrats on that achievement. What a journey! What a journey! Because I don't think I've spoken with lots of veterinarians, and surprisingly, I've met a couple that have done that veterinarian and software experience, and I think it offers a unique opportunity to teach about the new technology and use that technology into the practice to become more efficient. And speaking about that, I wanted to get your take, of course, since we're talking about this podcast, on AI.
Yeah.
The new boom word that's around. And we were chatting just before this podcast that AI is a big word, right? There's a lot of things that encompass AI, and I wanted to get your take on the different facets that you've seen that are being applied to veterinary medicine that you have played around with. What is your general take on it? And yeah.
I mean, I guess firstly, I'm a massive geek, right? So like I'm super excited by AI and the potential. Although I kind of oscillate every now and then from listening to a podcast or, like Eliezer Yudkowsky telling me that, AI is going to take over the world and we're all going to die, and, a kind of paperclip maximizer, problem, and we're all going to find, the end of humanity. But if I put those kind of vague
Right.
concerns aside, I'm otherwise hugely excited about the opportunities from AI, and through, like, every facet of our lives, and clearly, the veterinary profession is not going to be isolated from
Mhm.
that. And I think, what you said's really interesting there, that it's such a catch-all term,
Gotcha.
AI,
Yeah.
and I think that when we talk about its use, we more need to be thinking about individual aspects of it, individual tools, and how they can be applied, particularly where we're talking about more like narrow AI rather than, some kind of broad, AGI type kind
Yeah.
of concept.
Of course.
And so I think there, when we're thinking about the tools, they kind of fall into a couple of buckets. And some of those we've been using as a profession for a while, I guess, without being fearful or concerned about it. And so the kind of machine vision type ones, which are kind of,
Yeah.
deep learning systems that are identifying parasites down microscopes, or gait analysis, looking at, video recordings of pets. These are, I think, things that the profession has steadily started to kind of adopt and find less fear-inducing, perhaps, than the generative AI,
Yeah.
and the kind of rise of LLMs and, ChatGPT, and what that means for all of us. But yeah, we had a get together in the UK with the regulator, with the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, talking about AI, and we were discussing it just this week. And, I think at the moment, at least, the way I think about it is like any other tool in our clinical arsenal. So when my father went through vet school, he wasn't taught about ultrasound. Like, it wasn't a thing. Whereas when I went through, I was taught about ultrasound.
Yeah.
Now, I wasn't just kind of given a probe and told, look, off you go and use it, see what you can see.
Yeah.
We were taught not just how to, like, interpret the images, these kind of fuzzy gray dots, and, what we could make out from it, but also the physics behind it.
Mm.
Now, we weren't supposed to be experts on the
Sure.
physics, but we were going back to the principles of, like, what ultrasound is, why we might see certain patterns, why certain things, how you can know if what you're seeing is meaningful information or is artifact.
Yeah.
And I think that I view AI in its current sense in the same kind of bracket. It's a tool for vets, where if we can get some level of education and understanding as to the concepts behind it, that can enable us to really decide where that tool is most effective, what its weaknesses are, what its benefits are, and how to apply it, just like we would anything else.
Do you think that this is such a great point? I'm also, a geek and very curious always to like learn the inner things of how things work. But do you think most veterinarians would be interested in, understanding, maybe the deeper things about AI? And we don't need to talk about the super specific things of how a transformer works, but, like, do you think they would be interested in knowing a little bit more details, like you were saying about the ultrasound with like physics and whatnot? Like, do you think that is of interest in general?
I think this is an easier problem for people going through graduate programs currently, because I
Okay.
just think, like, that teaching needs to go into
Right.
universities. And in the same way as not everybody enjoyed learning about the physics of ultrasound, it
For
was
sure.
just a thing you did, right, as part of your course and as background.
For
It's
sure.
much harder once you're out and you're in practice to say to
Right.
everyone, like, now we've got to, like, learn about,
Yeah.
like, yeah, exactly, like transformer networks, what's an attention network, and different
Yeah.
types of.
Yeah.
So, it's I agree with you. There's a limit to it, but I think that there is a real curiosity.
Okay.
Like, my impression from the profession is that there is a real curiosity around it. And I think it's just how you pitch it, right? Like, you don't have to go into the absolute
Hmm.
bottom level of the
Yeah.
details. There's like a fascinating video with Richard Feynman from, decades ago, where he's asked a question about why from this BBC reporter, and he's like, well, I don't know what you mean by why. Like, we can keep going down and down and down, right? Like, we can go down to the quantum physics
Forever.
level, and, like, it's just why all the way down.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
like, we can scratch the
Get
surface
some.
in terms of,
Yeah.
like, what's usable for, for the profession, and what helps them kind of interpret what, where things are appropriate. And I think there's scare stories, particularly with generative AI, about data integrity,
Yeah.
security, leakage of things, hallucination, and these words are kind of quite scary as well, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
um, those sort of things. I think we can educate about.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that because I wanted to do that a segue into that particular conversation, which is, sometimes I've talked to veterinarians and some like you that are very pro the technology and know about the technology, are curious about technology. Some others that are a little bit more hesitant. And sometimes what I've seen are two factions. So one of them is I don't want to use it because it's going to take over my job and it's too complicated. And of course there's answers to that. It's not to come to replace your job, it's to augment your job. But then the other one that I haven't talked too much about and I'm curious to get your thoughts is about, data integrity and data leakage and privacy and concerns about, well, you're feeding all of this data to large language models and what if that data is not used correctly and what are sort of the privacy limitations that you can have with that data. And you and I talked a little bit about RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation, another fancy term for bringing context to your large language model. But apart from these terminologies, I wanted to get your take on how do you think we can evolve both from a training point of view, like an education point of view, to veterinarians and other people about sure there are risks associated with like data integrity and leakage, but there's also ways to combat these things. And I don't know, wanted to get your take on whether you've heard about these things, whether you've talked to people about these types of risks of the data side of thing, and what do you think?
Yeah, look, vets are just so wonderful at like we're critical thinkers, and the first time you give us a problem or or even a solution, we start to think about all of the edge cases and the challenge.
Right places. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, the edge cases, and so it's the nature of things because I think as well within the profession, not only do we select for that kind of personality type, but also like mistakes are really, really bad when you're dealing
Yeah,
with living things because you sometimes have just one opportunity, and if you get it wrong, there's
that's it.
suffering and potentially death at the end of it. So we really are always getting to really high degrees of confidence, and
Yeah.
I think it's right that vets have a kind of caution towards things like data. I think actually historically people have been maybe too lax about data, but we want to be careful the pendulum doesn't swing too far the other way. I think for every downside scenario that people think of, not only are there technical solutions to these, because giant organizations and governments are using these tools with far more sensitive data probably than we're dealing with,
Yeah.
but also we there will be a kind of risk benefit analysis here, and the benefits of using the tools will be so high. One of the things I was talking about recently when we were at this regulatory point, which I think is just super interesting to me, is I think we're at a period where people are concerned that if that the use of AI tools should be regulated against potentially, that the regulator should be saying, look, there was a problem here, somebody used this tool, and look at the damage that was caused by
Hmm.
it. I think it's going to very quickly potentially swing to the opposite way, which is that the regulator is going to be saying, or certainly as my professional regulator, that actually you're negligent if you don't use these tools. Because the benefits they provide may get so strong that actually we just we to deliver the best care we need to be engaging with them in the same way as if dental radiography when I graduated was a rare thing. Now if you're not doing it,
Yeah,
you're
you're
not
no.
delivering the best
Yeah, yeah,
service, potentially doing a
yeah,
disservice to the animals. So I
yeah,
think, those data concerns are that they're not without some validity, but they've got to be put into context. And also they're dependent, as we talked about before, on the type of AI that you're using, rather than just wrapping it all up in this catch-all term of AI. There's definitely different risks with different systems in
yeah,
different implementations.
yeah.
And I think they're all solvable problems and worries.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes complete sense. I wanted to ask you, Dr. Ollie, you're the first veterinarian that is not in the US that I talked to. I wanted to understand, very briefly, if you can share, like, how's the conversations about AI in veterinary medicine in the UK compared to the US, or have you seen a difference? Do you see more people adopting it there, less people adopting it there, like, or do you not see any difference? Or yeah, anything that you might want to share?
No, I think the flag behind me may confuse anyone watching it. But
We're
no,
gonna get to the flag. We're gonna get to the
no,
flag.
no, but I'm definitely UK based. But I speak to people in the US, I think in both there's a bit of like universality between vets. Vets kind of, you can sort of see each other across like an exhibition hall, and someone's a vet, and there's always like kind of a secret handshake or like a wink. Like we're very there's a lot of similarity between people in the profession, and I think we've got more similarities than differences, particularly in terms of how we approach medicine. But just generally speaking, you guys, you're a bigger market. I think there's more engagement for more advanced practice management tools. I think, examples like yourself, where there's just, a high desire to kind of innovate and produce new products, I
Yeah.
think is more heavily coming from the US.
Mm.
And I think that just means we've probably got a narrower opportunity to pick things up off the shelf and use as easily.
So,
That clinical concern, I think they're much the same. This idea, that whether we're going to be replaced, or whether the downsides with the tools, I
right,
think
right,
they're
right.
common to the vet
Commented.
condition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Look, Dr. Ollie, I think we could spend 2 more hours talking, but in the interest of making this really short and almost 15 minutes, I wanted to leave with two things. One of them is if you have any sort of advice to young veterinarians or veterinarians who are hesitant to try these technologies. I'm not going to tell them to go and build the software companies that you built for them to learn, but like, what are some of the things that you could share for them to get started, for them to lose a little bit of the fear? I've heard simple advice like just get started, just play with ChatGPT, but some people, I don't know, like I wanted to hear it from you, like what sort of advice you would have to get into this new technology.
Yeah, I mean, like you, I think we come from a position where, like, the just trying out this stuff like inherently ticks boxes for us for just like an excitement reason. But I think just from a curiosity point of view, and to try and be less fearful of it, engaging with it. I mean, ChatGPT is like, I just find it fun to try and find ways to make it do things or say things, or, like, kind of how much can I kind of probe
Oh,
this thing and see what I can get out of it. Um, and so I think that there's definitely, an experience for everyone there. For those people who want to be a bit more, kind of technical, I think that there's always a worry. Vets are very commonly, the personality type is, again, we're quite sort of perfectionists.
yeah, yeah,
But actually, the great thing about software is that no animals are going to be harmed in the making of this software. You can just basically brute force it, right? You can hammer at it, just
yeah.
do things again and again and again
See, that's
until
gonna happen.
you start to do something. I mean, the
Yeah,
first bits of code I wrote were horrendous, and I probably spent 100 times longer doing something than I would now. But there's just no downside. The speed that you can learn things, you can iterate on, is really quick. So, you know, I've written articles before about the similarities between VetMed and software engineering. I
yeah,
actually think there's more than people realize. It's problem
yeah.
solving, it's logical approach to
It's
problems.
problem solving, it's logical problem.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And the
and
edge
it's
cases thing that you said, like we software engineers, like we always like to think about the edge cases as well. So it's like there's very similarities. Great.
and actually, like, it's never been easier, right? Because with ChatGPT, or you use, Copilot or something,
Yeah, yeah.
it will help you write the code,
It'll
and
help
it
you.
will debug for you in a way that was just never possible
Not
before.
possible before. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The last thing that I wanted to say, I said two things. The last thing is tell us about the flag.
The flag, yeah, it has been down to the moon. So that flag went down with Apollo 12,
It's
and went to the surface of the moon. I'm a big space geek as well as a computer geek, and I wanted some space memorabilia. And it is very, very difficult to get a British flag, because particularly one that went to the moon, because none of the British, we kind of managed to colonize most of the globe, but didn't make it as far as the moon. Um, so it had to be an American flag. But I love the Apollo program and all things Apollo, so I was very
it's amazing.
fortunate to be able to snag this at an auction,
That is
and
amazing.
yeah, I mean, I guess, without getting too,
Yeah,
too caught up in the sort of hype of it, but this is an example. The Apollo project is an example of like just the ingenuity of humanity, like what can be
amazing.
achieved.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, like very much that mentality of thinking about what's possible rather than just thinking about all the things that you can't
You
do or all
can
the
do. Yeah, yeah,
challenges.
yeah, yeah.
It's more about the solutions and how we get there.
Yeah, what a great way to end it. What a great way to end it. Thank you so much, Dr. Ollie. I appreciate you being here and appreciate your story. Thank you so much,
No,
man.
well, thank you for having me. Thank you.
Of course.